So welcome everyone to our Sustainability Advisory Committee. This is a meeting that's slightly off schedule for us. Again, we typically meet quarterly in person, but as indicated prior, had heard from you all a desire to discuss potential focus areas as well as work products that this group could potentially pull together to Metro's benefit and really advise us on sustainability and resilience work. So as with all our meetings, I do want to pause and provide opportunity for public comment. If there are any members of the public who are with us today, either feel free to unmute yourself and share your feedback or raise your hand. All right, I think we are good to move forward. So wanted to provide you all some brief sustainability updates since we last met. First one we were casually talking about before we started our meeting, and that is the transit referendum results. And so Choose How You Move, the program that we did share with you all several months ago when Michael Briggs came to speak to us, was voted by Davidson County residents to move forward, and specifically the element that residents were voting on was a half-penny sales tax surcharge to fund transportation improvements across the city. And so that is moving forward. We are deep in the throes of conversations about transitioning from kind of planning and education and outreach mode to implementation. And so some early things that have been announced are, one, we have a position that's been posted for a chief program officer for implementation of the Choose How You Move program. And so afterwards, I'm happy to send that link out to you all and encourage you to share it with your networks and help us find a really great, talented leader to help oversee this massive program in the years to come. We also have put together legislation, or working on putting together legislation in partnership with Sean Parker and Delisha Porterfield to ensure that we have advisory groups weighing in on implementation of that program. And so wanting to carry forward a lot of the great work that our technical and community advisory committee had done to help inform that program into this next stage of implementation. And so that should be coming soon. And again, the spirit there is to make sure that we do have really robust engagement, stakeholder oversight of the program, in addition to a whole host of different oversight mechanisms that we're considering establishing throughout. And then the third is we do know that because this is a significant scale up, we will be needing to partner with the private sector. And so one of the areas where we will be hosting in the near future information sessions is around program management. And so working in partnership with vendors to help really enhance and kind of augment current staff capacity to oversee this program and help with things like project scheduling and prioritization. You know, and looking at really how we work across our different Metro departments to deploy this program. So those are three things that you have already heard about, and there's a whole lot of other activity that's ongoing within Metro to really help us transition into implementation. Any questions on Choose How You Move? Awesome. Really exciting, and obviously going to have huge sustainability benefits for the city.
I did have one question, and this
Yeah,
is
go on ahead, Jeffrey.
information that's probably readily available somewhere. I'm just sort of curious as far as like sidewalks and which intersections will be benefiting from this. Are those already identified, and or will they be, you know, will we be soliciting feedback from individual neighborhoods about, you know, requested sidewalks and things like that, or are they already basically mapped out?
For the most part, we have identified those priority areas. Now, I will say that like any program and plan, it's there's constant reevaluation of needs and things that may have shifted or changed, or For example, let's say there's a private development that comes in that wants to update a sidewalk that we had flagged as something that would be funded by Choose How You Move. That frees up those resources for rededication elsewhere. So for the most part, we have identified locations where improvements will occur. But again, that could shift and change over time as circumstances change, as resources change. I think the other thing I'll share is that we have a great interactive website that maps out across the county all of the projects that are included in the program. Just because a project is not included in the program doesn't mean it will not move forward. It just may not move forward as part of that program. So there are other existing programs like our Capital Sidewalks program that NDOT administers, in the example of sidewalks, that could move a project forward. So just because something isn't included in that Choose How You Move program doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Another great example of one that is of interest to this group is zero emissions transition for our transit fleet. So that is not a scope of work and project that's included in the program, but that work is very much happening. It's still very much in the planning stages, but it's happening sort of concurrent with implementation of the Choose How You Move program. So I share that with you to say, yes, that resource is out there. Please take a look at it. I can send it out with our notes. But just because you don't see a particular project that may be of interest to you or that you might think is a priority doesn't mean it isn't going to happen. So, okay. Next item I wanted to share with you all is we were accepted and announced as a beneficiary of the Clean Energy to Communities program. So this is a DOE program that the City of Nashville, in partnership with Nashville Electric Service, Middle West Tennessee Clean Fuels, Urban League, and Oak Ridge National Labs are engaging in. And it's very much a technical assistance program where we do receive some financial award, but the vast majority of that award actually is awarded to ORNL in partnership with the participating local government. And really what we'll be doing under this program is helping to develop a very robust integrated roadmap to look at how we achieve our carbon emissions reduction goals of 80% by 2050, while focusing on resiliency and reliability in light of growth. And so it's going to help us anticipate where we see growth on the grid occurring, how we can obviously decarbonize as part of that growth. But it'll also, I think, have a lot of benefits in terms of how we think about build out of infrastructure across our city. So we actually have our first meeting as a team this afternoon, but wanted to share that exciting announcement with you all. It's about a total of $4 million worth of assistance. Again, the bulk of that is funding that goes to Oak Ridge National Labs to help perform the modeling and analysis that NES, Metro Nashville, and others will benefit from. So stay tuned. That's about the bulk of the details that I have there, but really exciting that we're starting to exercise and get in the habit of trying to leverage federal funding for local sustainability work. The last item I wanted to note is that we also were announced as recipients of US DOE funding for the Technology Integration Program. This is actually a proposal that Tennessee Tech led amongst multiple different local metros and local power companies. And so we're one of several that will benefit, but the particular benefit that we're going to receive is actually retrofit of some of our transit vehicles used for sort of downtown park and rides to convert those to electric, and then also install some EV infrastructure to support those. So it is a relatively small contained project, but nonetheless supportive of our transition to zero emissions technology within our fleets. And so again, that's a relatively recent announcement. Tennessee Tech is the lead. We're a beneficiary in partnership with Nashville Downtown Partnership. So wanted to share that with you all. And then we did submit our 2 community change grants. Really, the second larger one, the $20 million one that we spoke at length about last time, was actually submitted just Monday. And then we also submitted our capacity building grant earlier in the month as well. So that kind of rounds out some of the brief sustainability updates. Again, a lot of other activities ongoing, but wanted to share those recent announcements and exciting pieces of news with you all. I also wanted to acknowledge with this group, and I know, you know, we were talking about how bittersweet the recent election was. I know, obviously, it was really exciting from a local perspective in the Choose How You Move program. But in light of the presidential election, an activity that I'm engaging in and getting a lot of questions about from different departments, but also different external stakeholders, is what the election means for sustainability and resilience work at the local level. And so just know that that is a process we're working through. There are a variety of different multi-state associations and agencies and think tanks that are also doing this analysis on a national scale. And so we'll be trying to leverage those to the extent possible to help inform this work, but just know that it is something we're thinking a lot about and trying to understand. And so hope to be able to come back to this group to share more specific updates and how that changes our work and how we think and talk about it. Councilmember Allen.
So it would be helpful to have an answer when people say, well, this change in administration means that all that infrastructure money is going to go away. My understanding is that Congress voted that in and they would have to vote it out. It can't be done by presidential executive order, and that every state is benefiting from it. So is there a way to get kind of an authoritative answer to that question, just so we can respond to people? Because I think that narrative is going to get out of hand if we don't have a good answer.
Yeah, noted, Councilmember Allen. I think that's a discussion I need to have with several peers at the leadership table, because I don't know that it's just specific to the sustainability and resilience area. And I think it's from what I have heard, there are pieces of things that I don't know that anything's impossible, but it would be very challenging to undo a lot of the things that have been done. Again, not impossible, but very challenging is sort of my gut reaction to things, particularly if things are already under contract and have been awarded to local governments. Where it probably does get a little bit more challenging is for programs where funds aren't already allocated or under contract. There's probably a little bit more wiggle room there. But to your point, Councilmember Allen, I think there probably is some analysis that will be done, I would hope, at the federal level to say, you know, how are our local governments benefiting from this? And is that a risk that we are willing to take? All that being said, again, I don't know that anyone knows exactly what's going to happen. So I think that's why we're wanting to do that analysis. I think worst case scenario, it results in just a lot of shifting of resources around. And to the extent that there is kind of a, I think it's also challenging because we not only receive federal funding, we also receive funding through the state. And so it's looking at multiple layers of decision making, not just federal government. And so we're thinking a lot about it. And again, I don't want to misspeak or misrepresent circumstances, but know that we're talking about it not just as it relates to work that this group is concerned with, but across all priority areas. Linda?
Well, I had exactly the same question, but mine was a little more specific because I think you're exactly right, Kendra. My understanding is that what's key is whether the funds have been obligated and are under contract. And if not, you know, the president-elect has pledged to try to withdraw those funds, get them out of the pipeline. As you guys have probably read, EPA is trying desperately to obligate as much as possible. I do think they'll meet some resistance because when funds are flowing in, even if it's a Republican state, typically the members of Congress like to keep that funding. But my specific question was, does the city or the state, like in the form of the CCAP, the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, have funds that they've been granted but not obligated? To me, that was sort of my specific question.
At the city level, there might be a handful of things. I think we're doing everything in our power to get those funds under contract. I would say the larger number is things we've applied for but have not heard back from any federal agency on. And then again, the sort of concern area is, okay, great, so you're awarded funds. How do you then quickly get that under contract? So I think there might be a small subset of things, but we are quickly shifting towards sort of how can we get as much as we can, either obligated, applied for, even under contract as possible. So. But I think more to come as we understand that further. Actually, one of my colleagues, I have asked him to step in on a call on this very topic. That's a webinar that's ongoing right now. And I think what's been interesting to me is these conversations are happening in a lot of locations. And I think the answer is slightly different depending on the group leading the conversation and sort of the parties in the room. And so I think the other challenge here is nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. We know that there are things that have been discussed during the campaign, but capacity or feasibility of follow through is very unknown at this point. So.
Hey, Linda, just from the state perspective, and I'm not going to speak for TDEC as a whole, but it probably runs the gamut in terms of, you know, the status of where various awards are, whether it's, you know, we're waiting on notification of award, or we're in contract negotiation, or, you know, we've got a contract, but funds haven't been sort of transferred to the state yet. So I'm sure across the myriad of programs that TDEC has, there's some example of all of those. I know just for my office, we've got 3 pending DOE grants that range in terms of award notification from December to March. So, you know, I think a lot remains to be seen, especially with those that, you know, we're waiting for award notifications until March. So it's kind of early, but kind of ready for anything.
Thanks, Matt. And do you guys have your CCAP money already obligated, I assume, your Comprehensive Climate Action Plan funds?
You know, I'm on the advisory committee for it, but I don't know the exact answer,
Okay.
so I hate to speak with certainty on that.
And from the local level on CCAP, it's actually the Greater Nashville Regional Council that is leading that effort. And I know yesterday they had an advisory board meeting, and GNRC brought up that they were moving forward with that work. I know that's not an answer to the question of are they already under contract, but I will see Michael Skipper later today and would be happy to ask that specific question.
Thank you.
Anything else on that item? Again, I felt I would be remiss if I did not bring it up, but I also know that there are probably more questions than answers at this point, and we'll move through this process together and with other cities and again hope for the best. So, all right. So now we can transition, I think, into the discussion portion of our meeting. And so I you know, have some ideas for maybe how to facilitate the discussion, but I'm really looking to you all to share feedback. And I know some of this feedback was shared via email, again, some orally in prior meetings, but wanted to create that space to discuss whether or not they're focus areas for this group or specific scopes of work to tackle. I think before we dive into that, I wanted to share with you all kind of my perspective and sort of how I have thought about this group. You know, sustainability and resilience are highly interdisciplinary topics, and from a local government perspective, projects that touch those concepts are widely dispersed across our departments. And so because of that, I wanted to create a space where we could bring subject matter experts on topics that are germane to sustainability and resilience together to, first of all, create a better understanding and more awareness about what sustainability and resilience work at the local level looks like, but also to help advise us on things we should be thinking about, but also to vet specific projects or programs through and have sort of that transparent stakeholder engagement process as part of how we do business. And so from my perspective, that is the charge of this group. And I don't necessarily see a need to do more than that, but I'm also open to this group taking on additional responsibility. I just want to make sure that we're structuring that appropriately, that Metro has the capacity to advise that, but also that we're getting that work then in front of appropriate bodies, but also collaborating with appropriate bodies to vet that work and discuss that work prior to taking it on. So with that, I'm open to discussion and just invite anyone to share a particular perspective or feedback on this topic. Linda.
So I would just note, thank you for that. I would just note that we have some really ambitious goals set for the city, some of which our mayor, got passed during his tenure as a council person. We have goals for EVs, we have goals for buildings, we have goals for a renewable portfolio standard. We also have a climate mitigation plan. We have an adaptation and resilience plan. We have a zero waste plan. And so I would just say big picture, what I would hope is that this committee could help with implementation in some way. And I'm happy to share some thoughts on that, but I just wanted to sort of make that opening bid, which is we have done so much legwork in this community, and Councilperson Allen and others have, already achieved so much. We have a food waste reduction goal. So I would love to see whatever we do focusing on moving those goals forward.
Councilmember Allen?
I agree completely, and I would add to that sustainability on the East Bank, because that's such an opportunity that if we don't grab it now, we'll be too late.
100%. That's a perfect example of implementing some of these plans in a specific context.
And just again, reminding folks that our December meeting, the main topic we will be talking about is sustainability on the East Bank. And so I think one thing that might make sense there is that we have that briefing and that discussion with project principals and then make a determination as to sort of, again, how we influence sustainability on the East Bank. I think we can discuss that further today, but also just want to note that there will be a lot more information shared with us next month.
Has the mayor already selected his appointees to?
I will have to check with our boards and commissions folks. I do not believe he has.
Okay, because it would be nice to have a sustainability voice, obviously, on that.
Jennifer.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that Linda and Councilmember Allen just said in terms of implementation. There's a lot of plans, so I guess I would pose a question to you, Kendra, of how is your office prioritizing all of those targets and plans, and then maybe that can help us inform where we can be the most helpful, because I don't think we can do all of those things.
Yeah. So kind of at a high level, the way we have thought about prioritizing implementation is not all that different than I think how the Climate Action Plan identified prioritization of implementation, and that's that we are trying to target areas where our most significant greenhouse gas emissions occur. And so obviously with Mayor O'Connell also layering in his priorities for the city, recognizing that mobile source emissions are a significant contributor. And so Choose How You Move is obviously a massive program and project that will help us get at some of those mobile source emissions. Also looking at fleet electrification remains a priority. But then also decarbonizing our energy consumption in spaces that Metro utilizes. And I know that Jennifer Westerholm is with us today, and obviously she is doing a significant chunk of this work within the general services footprint in particular. Also working through our renewable portfolio standard and trying to enhance presence of solar on Metro properties. We're in the thick of capital spending plan conversations right now with Metro departments about how we can, continue to fund major capital improvements. And I'm hopeful that solar can be a part of that. Also through continued work with Nashville Electric Service and Tennessee Valley Authority to really try to compel decisions at their levels that can support decarbonization. So leveraging the 5% flexibility provision, and then also really encouraging TVA to decarbonize at an accelerated pace. And then the third area where I'm spending a lot of time right now, at least on the climate action and kind of greenhouse gas mitigations space, is looking at waste management. So obviously we have hired a new director of waste services. Her name is Tracy Thurman. And I think immediately she's focused on focusing on a culture of high performance and reliability, and really trying to instill confidence in our waste collection services for residential areas. But long term, once she gets that foundation in place, thinking a lot about what our long-term waste management strategy is, and that includes a variety of different things. How do we continue to dispose of the waste that we generate, knowing that regional landfill capacity is a concern, but then also how do zero waste strategies, waste reduction, waste diversion strategies become part of our operating model in a more sustainable way, and how do we also make waste services operations financially sustainable moving forward. So there's a whole wealth of work that will be done in that space. And I would say those are the current priority areas. It doesn't mean that we're not doing work in other spaces, or if we have organically priorities that come up, that we would not be tackling those, but those are sort of the large buckets that I would say are priorities right now. From a climate adaptation perspective, I think really educating people on the concepts of adaptation and resilience is really important. As you all know, we have a relatively new climate adaptation plan and story map tool that talks about climate risk in the city. And so I think socializing that content and making sure that people are aware of those things, but then also extreme heat are going to be early priorities there, flooding as well. But that is an area that I would say we are better equipped to handle today and more familiar with relative to extreme heat. And then of course, throughout all of that, trying to minimize impact on vulnerable populations. And throughout kind of both of those areas that I just prioritized, we also have the Bloomberg American Sustainable Cities program that I think will enhance our capacity to do this work in ways that really ensure that we're being inclusive and equitable in our approaches to sustainability and resilience work, and then also specifically delivering benefits back to populations that have historically borne the brunt of climate change and historic decision making. So I know that was a lot, but I would say that's where we're seeing priority focus shake out today. An exercise that I'm actually engaging in with my team and individuals that I work with in other departments is really trying to develop a little bit more of a kind of 3-year implementation strategy. This is something that I haven't done since I started under the Cooper administration. And so the timing is right to develop that. I look at that as more of a work program. Again, it's not going to be inclusive of everything we're doing, but it's intended to help keep me on track, but also help me make sure that I can wrap my hands around all the great work that Metro departments are doing and making sure that we're working on the right things and moving in the same direction. So that's another work product that I'll be in the process of developing into the new year and would be happy to share with this group for its feedback. Is that helpful, Jennifer, or were you looking for maybe something more specific?
That is helpful, and I think that's a start for our discussion. I saw Stephanie also put a comment in here.
Yeah, just more of a question maybe for you, Kendra. I think focusing on implementation makes a lot of sense, and excited to see the 3-year kind of priorities and plans. But of all of the sort of many talents or assets on this committee, I'm just curious what you feel like you and your office need most to accelerate the implementation.
Yeah, when I look at constraints to doing more, I would say two of the largest ones are, well, one of the largest ones is just access to resources. That's both manpower, but also financial resources to execute. And so I think helping us tell the story is an area for an area that would be helpful for this group, whether that's through quantification of metrics or the like. I also think connecting us with additional funding sources, particularly if we're going to see a lot of support for this work go away at the federal level, I think that is very helpful. We actually have 3 positions that the mayor's office has posted that are part of an advancement in strategic partnerships group. And so that they are obviously going to work across priority areas, but there's a recognition that we can be, seeking funding from additional sources, whether that be federal government and grants, state government and grants, or philanthropic funding. So there's an acknowledgement that that's an opportunity area, and we will have 3 individuals helping us with that. So I think helping to advocate for funding would be really important. I think the other thing is helping me and Metro draw connections between work. So because it is a highly interdisciplinary topic, it's sometimes left out of the conversation. And so I think helping us identify areas where there are perhaps gaps and how we're thinking about activities, I think is really helpful as well. And so you all are on this committee because you do a lot of different things in our community, and then you also have subject matter expertise that is really beneficial to this work. And so I think if you're hearing about actions that Metro is taking that don't seem to be considering this, highlighting that is obviously an opportunity area. And I know you guys have brought up feedback about East Bank in particular. And so I think next month is a great time to have that conversation. Other ideas from this group?
Sorry, you may have mentioned this while I stepped away for a second, but I know that some of the plan sort of vary between things specifically, I think, for metro government versus things that impact the cities. I mean, obviously that impacts the city as a whole, but versus things that are sort of directed at the city. Would you like to think about our kind of split? You know, should we think about that kind of 50-50? Would you like this group to think a little bit more about kind of implementation in the city versus in metro government? Curious.
I do think actually a great opportunity area for this group is implementation throughout the city. I feel like we are doing a good job, maybe not the best job, but a good job of thinking about implementation across departments. We've grown a lot in that space, I think, you know, in the last decade. And so I would say that's a stronger area of ours. I do think an area where we are less comfortable is talking about sustainability throughout the city. And so I think that's actually a really great space for this group to work in. And I know Linda and Caroline, you were involved in these conversations under the prior administration. There were a lot of conversations about public-private partnerships and sort of how are we leveraging local nonprofits, local businesses, to help kind of further sustainability across the city. And so I do think that that's an opportunity area, particularly if we are going to be focusing more resources or trying to leverage those partnership opportunities more.
Great, that's helpful and guidance. Thank you.
One thing that has been on my mind is sort of the Metro General Services, the mayor's office, MNPS have all been doing, making great efforts to further sustainability through waste reduction in these composting pilots that are going on. And forgive me, but that's obviously a lot of the most of my time is spent thinking about food waste reduction and keeping food out of landfills. And I've been thinking about how the Metro food scrap collection, the residential pilot that is ongoing with the 750 houses, you know, my understanding is that was funded from a private donor. And also the MNPS pilot that is now been implemented. We've got bins, collection containers for food scraps and compostable materials at close to 20 metro schools now. I've been wondering about how we might be able to help drive private funding for implementation of new programs and whether there might be an organization, not me, for furthering sustainable, to fund sustainability, the implementation of sustainability programs in cases where, you have an organization that says, oh, okay, well, that sounds really great, but, we need $10,000 or $20,000 or, whatever the capital startup cost might be. Who would be the best person to talk to about like what efforts are already being made so that when I talk to other folks who might be interested in starting something like that, so we're not redoubling efforts. I just don't know like how it was that, say, Nashville Waste Services came by the amount of funding from the private donor to start the residential pilot program, who those people are and how we might be able to help encourage other donors like that who might be interested in getting involved with sustainability initiatives or even, potentially crowdfunding in, smaller chunks from people who might be interested to donate $20 to it and they don't have $250,000.
So I'll first of all, I am by no means an expert in sort of the philanthropic community here locally, but there are, I would say, several large foundations that exist within Nashville, and several forums that do try to regularly convene those foundations and have more strategic conversations about their priorities and sort of how they're investing their funds. One that I think probably is the most diverse in its funding, I would say, is probably the Community Foundation. They serve to some extent as a convener or an aggregator of philanthropic donations, and they do have various priority areas. And so something that perhaps could be discussed is whether or not there's appetite for a larger grouping of funds to focus on these priorities. Obviously, I think folks probably in this group have that appetite. What I don't know is whether or not there's a large appetite within the philanthropic community or within sort of the larger public. Jennifer, I see you're saying you're at the Philanthropy Southeast Conference right now. Do you want to maybe provide some input based on your past work, but also current presence at that conference?
The conference actually officially starts at 2:00. I'm at the
Okay.
investing pre-conference part right now, so I'll let you know next time.
Okay. Linda, I don't know if you have anything to add. I know that you have been involved in some of those philanthropic conversations, and so you also might know a little bit more about the genesis of some of the philanthropic funding and sort of how some of the priority areas had been identified.
I actually don't have a lot to add. I think you covered that, but I think from a bigger picture perspective, I thought, the point that Caroline raised was really important about our role in terms of community mobilization and as opposed to Metro. And one of the functions some of these prior committees have served, which we might want to think about, would be more of a public education function or convening function if we think that's, I don't know, maybe too ambitious, but here are my thoughts on that. And this relates to Jeffrey's point is, first of all, we could just host community education programs in a lot of these areas if we think that would be useful. And what hosting that looks like, we'd have to talk about. But it's a platform that could be used. And if we wanted to go a step further, we could talk about using the committee as a way to convene some dialogues. And so, for example, one of those dialogues might be to invite the philanthropic community to brainstorm with us about Jeffrey's questions and others. And, I'd be curious, I don't know if Joe is listening, Joe Bass and some others from the business community, but I also wonder if it might not be an opportunity to convene a dialogue with some of the business community about helping to implement some of these plans. And similarly with Matt, to convene a dialogue about how the city's work interfaces with the state's, CCAP. And so I think there are a host of issues that could benefit from community dialogue. And so I just throw out there whether either just a one-way, transfer of information on key topics for the community or going a step further and convening to dialogue on some of these key issues.
I saw a lot of hands go up. So Erica, I think I saw yours first.
Thank you. And I'm at Greenfield, so I have a lot of background noise, so I apologize about that. But Urban Green Lab is going through their strategic planning process coming up here for 2025 to 2030. And since they're a mission-driven educational sustainability community engager, I'm wondering if there's not a leverage point solely to talk to them perhaps first to think about what they're already doing in the community for food waste and different initiatives. Because I do agree that I think there's sort of a two-pronged approach between the community members and learning what to do in your neighborhood versus what businesses could do. Because I know we retired the workplace challenge a long time ago, but that was a way to engage a lot of businesses in the downtown core, in the Midtown area, with thinking about sort of core areas about sustainability. And I know it's a program and it takes funds and people have to run the program and things like that, but I'm thinking about like the quickest way of having something be putting into the community as a competitive advantage to say they're a sustainable business and what are they doing for their waste or what are they doing for commuting. I know before COVID or early on in COVID, we did even like there was commuter challenge where businesses in the downtown area were competing against each other to try different opportunities of transit, be it carpooling, be it taking the bus, be it biking, all of that kind of stuff. So I think without having sort of a consolidated list of some of those things, like all together to see what's the campus or what's already sort of out there, then B, it's like, are there strategic places where we can partner or leverage? And then how do we as this group, you know, make that happen or help make that happen? Since I'm at Greenville, there's a renewed sense of urgency to climate action and thinking about things, you know, that I can do tomorrow versus trying to also think about, you know, is it a 6-month or is it a year plan? And I think because I'm here, it's probably, I feel this more sense of urgency, but you know, I think there's a lot of leverage points that if we sort of map them out, we could probably find organizations or ways that we could get action quicker or get a plan in place to help get something started quicker.
Awesome. Thanks, Erica. Joe.
Linda had called me out, so yeah, no, I agree. The business community engagement, you know, it's but projects are great. Advisory and awareness opportunities are better. You know, one thing I'm grappling with, sort of in the corporate world with climate right now, is okay, without the urgency of federal regulations, what motivation is left there? And really, a big part of our focus has been on talking about the dollars and cents of it. You know, I know this has been said, but focusing on, you know, why we have these plans and why we're implementing these plans, not just from the environmental point of view, but because it's going to help Nashville remain competitive. It's going to help it remain an attractive relocation target, particularly as other parts of the country and the world become less habitable or less comfortable. Why Nashville's resilience is so important to our economic prospects, and really finding the right business and economic partners to take that message to the broader community, because, you know, there's gonna be a lot of people out there saying, well, if I don't have to do this anymore, why am I gonna do it? And they'll be asking the same question of us. And I still think that Metro has a lot to gain from being an example and an organizer in the business community.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Other ideas or thoughts? Oh, Jennifer?
I'm wondering, it sounds like there is kind of a theme here of spreading the impact of the work that your office is doing, whether it's spreading impact or convening people to help implement. But it's like taking this work and I'm imagining like spray paint, you know, just like spraying it out. I wonder if that could be a theme, but then maybe we can organize kind of like a board has subcommittees without trying to create more work, right? Or add more work to your team's plate. Like maybe along the lines of your 3 priorities. Maybe we have a subcommittee for zero waste, a subcommittee for clean energy, and a subcommittee for, what was the first one? I forgot the first one, sorry.
Well, one was, I would say, through lowering mobile source emissions,
Yes.
looking at green energy, and then zero waste.
Right, yeah. So maybe we have 3 subcommittees, not everyone has to join, just if for those of us who are interested in being more involved, to join however many we want to. And then that comes then on top of the normal SAC activities that you talked about, which is still having value in us, look at like big projects that have come through.
And so Jennifer, what would those subcommittees do? Just have a deeper discussion on how non-metro parties could leverage and support metro priorities? Okay.
Exactly. So basically, and I think for each of those areas, the answer will probably be different, right? The solutions will be different. The parties that come to the table that we.
Uh-oh, we lost her. Jennifer, I think we lost you. Michelle, do you want to jump in while we're waiting for Jennifer to rejoin?
I think she's back.
Oh, Jennifer, we lost you at the end there.
Oh,
You were saying the solutions or recommendations might be different based on different committees.
yeah, as well as the parties that we would want to bring to the table.
Okay. Great. Michelle.
I just have a question. So we've been talking about the big buckets of waste, transit, energy, but one of the other big parts of emissions we have is buildings. Are there any talk, because I know it was on the table years ago, but I don't know currently, about building performance standards for Nashville? Is that still being discussed at all?
It is still being discussed. I would say current constraints right now for at least the city leading that conversation are resources. I think it's still absolutely an interest area. I think it's probably more of a late 2025 conversation rather than an early 2025 conversation as to when we might potentially initiate that work.
Thank you.
And Linda, I saw that you put in the chat a question about, can we have the Bloomberg team talk with the committee at some point? Are you referring to large, just like Bloomberg consulting or philanthropies, or just the Bloomberg American Sustainable Cities team?
The folks who are going to be working here in Nashville.
Yeah, we can absolutely have them come. Right now, it is still Robert on the team, and he was present at our last Sustainability Advisory Committee. I do think we should create space for that I team, the innovation team, to have deeper conversations with this group. We do have a civic designer that has been hired. Her start date is officially December 2nd. And so that team is very much still being shaped. But as they start moving through their innovation process and work with the community, I do think having a regular update, or maybe it's a standing agenda item where they're providing updates on the progress of their work. But I think that's a great suggestion, Linda, and I'll get with Robert and sort of figure out how we can best leverage this group to be an influential voice in what they're doing. Matt.
I know we've talked a lot about implementation, and I definitely agree with that as an area of focus or support that we can offer. But I think one of the things I still struggle with, more as a resident of Davidson County, is, as you preface this whole discussion with, Kendra, the multitude of plans that are out there and the variety of strategies that fall within those plans. The Metro Zero Waste plan comprises 20 different policy and implementation strategies alone. And then all the work that happened under Mayor Cooper and his, sustainability committee. And, I know you mentioned the sort of 3-year work plan goals that you're going to set for yourself and your group, but even with the addition of the transit plan and the PCAP and then the CCAP that's coming down the pike, I just struggle a little bit with we've got limited resources, limited capacity. What are like the top items that we want to do as a city and as Metro government? And so I'm not saying we need to plan for a plan or create a plan for all the plans, but I do feel like and this is just me personally here, but if we had, if I could point to the 10 top priorities for sustainability for the city, it would help me know where to focus my energy, and maybe the committee as well.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if there's a role for the committee to help with advising on prioritization of, sustainability work across this litany of plans, but
Mhm.
I know just as a resident, that would help me understand, like, what is the city moving towards? What are the top goals? And it may be such that, given the variety of funding sources out there, it's more pragmatic to take an opportunistic approach and like go for what you can get. But yeah, I think that's one challenge I see with like the variety of plans and all the strategies within them.
Yeah. Um, so so yes, I think there is a role for this committee to play in that space. And I do think where we will see that play out is probably in kind of the more programmatic document that I'll be trying to create. Some of that will be more just a recognition of what's already happening, but I think it'll also help solidify around where we need to be doing more. And so I think there's a way that we can come up with that sort of a document. We already have kind of 3 of them, I would say, identified. And then as you can imagine, there are a series of strategies that could then support each priority area. But I think that can be something that comes out of, I don't want to call it a strategic planning effort, but kind of this almost implementation planning work that I will be working on in partnership with departments. So. Other thoughts, ideas, or topics? Oh, go on ahead, Jennifer.
Sorry, one more idea. The other approach could be to say, okay, Kendra, your office is already focusing on these things. What's 1 or 2 areas that you don't have time to focus on? That, like, for example, heat, extreme heat, or something like that, where you don't have time to focus on it. That would be good for us to maybe not do and implement ourselves, but at least maybe start to lay the groundwork for your office's future work.
Great. Jason.
Hey, Kendra, and I had to step away for a second, so if this has been covered, I apologize. But I'd like to give this committee, like, off this some teeth. I think it would be nice to have oversight of some one of these policies. Like, I agree totally with Matt. There's so many out there. If you would identify one that you think is gonna be most impactful, or you think that this committee might have great expertise over, in being able to, annually or whatever, examine that policy. Because a lot of times, we have these policies out there, and it's supposed to have this review and all these things. And I, from a Davidson County resident standpoint and somewhat informed person, I don't ever see the report on the review and on how well this policy has been implemented or working. So that's just a thought. If there was something out there you thought, hey, it'd be good that we actually take ownership of a particular policy or policies, and that, I think, beyond our tenure would be a good foundation going forward. Thanks.
No, Jason, I like that. I think I have a couple of clarifying questions. One is, I want to better understand what you mean when you say the word oversight. And then second is also, what does policy mean? And the reason I ask that is I want to understand, again, would that then be putting this group in a position where it's technically advising a different advisory group or body or Metro Border Commission, or is it truly a space where there's kind of no existing governance structure? So I want to better understand that, I guess, and maybe that's part of, I think, what you and Jennifer are sharing when you say, help us, Kendra, figure out what is the best space for us to do that in. So.
Yeah, and I would lean upon the expertise of the group here for kind of exactly how that might look. I'm just thinking, for example, the the renewable portfolio standard that our mayor helped bring about. Where are we in that journey toward those goals? And if we're not up, I don't know if we're on target or not. And if we're not, then that's something that we should be able to at least report to the mayor or report to the council members, or go back and say, this is what we implemented, as a city, and we're below target, or we're well above target. It's great. But again, as Matt said, there's so many of those out there. Maybe that's not the one to go after and start with, but that was the thought that I was trying to convey.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Matt.
Yeah, two points. One will be a slight tangent, but I do like that idea from Jason and Jennifer. I was thinking more like holistically, what are the top priorities across all the plans that bubble up? And again, it sounds like your work with the implementation document or work plan is going to kind of get to that to some degree. But I do like the idea of like, where do you need the most help? Like, where can we be the most beneficial in supporting one of these plans or a specific area of focus as a starting point for us. So echo both Jason and Jennifer, and then very selfishly, at a future meeting, I would be really interested to hear more about the new Metro Waste Services department and meet the new director and just hear like the vision for what the structure is going to be, and how they're going to consider some of the past work that's been done around planning, like the zero waste plan, and sort of their future goals. Do we have a sense of a start date for when that department will be propped up? And
Right now they're hiring for, I would say, sort of the key leadership positions and administrative functions within that department. So obviously there's a whole host of what I would call legacy or existing positions that are doing the day-to-day operational work, and those are moved under Tracy's leadership now, but still technically within the water services organizational structure. And she's in the process of building her team. So she does have a deputy. His name is Eugene McKinney. He was actually part of our interviews for the waste services candidate. So really grateful that we got both of them to come into our organization. And so they will sort of over this year build out more organizational and administrative capacity. So all the things that a standalone department will need. And then I believe by essentially a year from this July, spin off into their own standalone department, and then continue into sort of more of those strategy conversations, both from a financial sustainability perspective, but also environmental sustainability perspective. But we can absolutely create or dedicate one of our meetings to hearing from Tracy and her team on her vision for that department. Linda.
So I'm wondering, just floating an idea based on what Jason suggested and Caroline suggested, if the kind of issue that this group could take on would be something related to the community as opposed to Metro. And so this is just an example, and I work in this area, but obviously there are a lot of other examples, I'm sure, but we do have a food waste reduction goal. And I could see, again, in sort of a convening capacity, this group looking at how could we develop a roadmap or a plan for getting there. It doesn't fall squarely within Metro Waste Services, clearly, huge piece of it, but because it's community wide, I could see that there could be some value in trying to develop some kind of roadmap. And I'm sure there are other areas like that are community focused that, probably aren't going to get done anytime soon. So a visioning exercise, a roadmap, a blueprint.
Thank you, Linda. Jason.
Well, I think I must have left my hand up.
Oh, is
I'm
your
good.
hand still up? Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Erica.
Know where I'm gonna go because I do love to draft an ordinance, but is that something that would fall under me as a private citizen with my council representation? Or would that be something that would be also part of this advisory committee role? Meaning, if we're going to talk about waste reductions in the community, I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts that didn't allow plastic bags for the last 20 years, right? So there are some of those types of things that are incremental steps to changing behaviors that as much community engagement we can do to educate people to think about their purchases really don't get done until there are more strategic implementation via banning, via ordinance, via whatever it is. And I don't know if that would fall under some of the steps, of this group to identify what those incremental steps might be to, again, aid in a plan that likely is published and we have steps to grow to, but how do we, again, accelerate or work with others or work to educate others so that we could get those type of things approved faster? And again, like I said, I grew up in a very small town in Western Massachusetts, and I don't remember ever having plastic bags, right? Like it was just not a thing.
Yeah. So I think so I think suggesting legislation on a variety of different topics could be something that this group does. I think there are a couple of probably discussion points or sort of steps in that process. Obviously, there would need to be, heavy and significant council member support, but you would probably also want departmental and mayoral office support prior to, this committee really introducing anything. And so I think there's a lot of legwork that typically should be done in order for legislation to be successful. So I think that could be the end result of work that this group does. Obviously, as it relates to plastic bags, that's a tough one where the state has already weighed in and preempted us from banning anything at the local level. And I know you were just providing that as an example, but I think we could, decide to put forth legislation, but I think having robust discussions with potentially impacted or interested parties has to come hand in hand with that. But if you as a resident want to draft legislation, I would suggest that you work through your council member to do that. I would say.
Well, and there's plenty of precedent for, as I'm sure we're all aware, for legislation regarding either food waste or electronics or extended producer responsibility for certain manufacturers. There's tomes of enacted legislation that is out there and available for review. If anybody is interested in sort of furthering that conversation, I'd be happy to do that either as a sidebar or, exploring what might be the most feasible, currently enacted bits of legislation that are going on in other cities or states.
Jeff. Other thoughts or ideas for this group to consider?
I think just going back to Michelle's original sort of email after our last meeting is just, I think defining what our call to action or what our charge is what we're all sort of talking, or they could be a lot of things, right? So I think whatever's most helpful to you, the departments you work with, giving us a charge, because I think we're all motivated to participate and help on several topics. But I think, again, without having that direction or knowing where we can be most impactful, I think that would just be really helpful, just to hear if it's two things, how do we create a work plan for this group and do those two things?
Okay. Linda?
I just want to interject as a veteran of a couple of these. I think a really important thing to keep in mind is that we don't create more work for Kendra. And I think that, I actually think, our providing advice is extremely valuable. And I love that everyone wants to do more. I just also want us to be super mindful of whatever it is doesn't sort of add to Kendra's agenda in terms of hours in the day or reviewing work products. So I just want us to be mindful of that, because I've seen in prior cases where it's ended up being a burden and not a plus. So I just would like to make sure we keep that in mind in whatever we design as our goal.
Caroline?
I was going to make a similar comment, and sorry that I'm home today with connectivity issues and an assistant here. But yeah, I just was going to say, Kendra, I'm more than happy offline to kind of help sift through some of the recommendations here to take that work off of your plate and help with that. That's usually in groups like this where I can be helpful. So yeah, don't want to create more work for you, and more than happy to take on some of the distilling of the great conversation today.
Thanks, Caroline. Cesar?
Yeah, good afternoon. In the spirit of helping advise, just in the resilience realm, just wanted to flag for you, Kendra, and others in the city that with Hurricane Helene efforts and hazard mitigation is going to become a hot topic, not only for North Carolina, obviously, that was impacted, but Tennessee. So just wanted to flag that as in the next few months, as those efforts move from a disaster response to a disaster recovery phase, that I wouldn't be surprised if a pipeline of opportunities, either from the private sector or less likely now from the federal government, but conversations will continue. And I know you have some efforts ongoing on that front, but just wanted to highlight the connection to Hurricane Helene and how that's going to inject some additional discussions on that front. So, and in the spirit of advising, happy to provide any kind of support and feedback as those come through. So.
Thank you. That's awesome. Appreciate that. And there have been a couple of multi-city letters talking about advocating for increased support for extreme weather event preparation and response that we've recently signed on to. So I do hope that that we do see lots of opportunities to better prepare cities in the near future. Caroline, Linda, do y'all both still have your hands up, or are those from previous comments?
Took mine down. Sorry about that.
No, that's good. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss you if you did have more to share.
Thanks.
So, any other ideas or feedback? Okay. Well, please know that this isn't the only opportunity. If something comes to you in the middle of the night or in the coming days or weeks, please feel free to shoot me an email. It'll probably be next week before I get to it, but try to roll up our discussion from today and share those notes with you all. But appreciate you all meeting sort of out of our normal cadence to talk through this and figure out again how we can make sure we're leveraging this group to its fullest capacity to help guide the city on these important topics. So good to see you all, and I'll see you next month in person.
Thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you. Bye.